The Syrian conflict has reached the one-year mark. We have the spokesperson for Syrian Solidarity New Zealand live in the studio, and we'll talk to him about the increasingly desperate situation back home in a moment. But first, the latest from Syria. Continuing violence is now driving thousands of refugees across the border into Turkey, forcing the Turkish government to consider setting up a buffer zone to protect those fleeing President Bashar al-Assad's army. The move would be considered foreign intervention, something UN Arab League envoy Kofi Annan is urging the Security Council to undertake to bring an end to the conflict. He made the call as security forces clashed with protesters in several Syrian cities. Hundreds fled gunfire in the northern city of Raqqa, while government troops battled army defectors near Damascus. Assad's forces are estimated to have killed at least 8,000 people in the last year.
The first objective is for all of us to try and stop the violence, the human rights abuses, and the killings, and get an unimpeded access for humanitarian assistance to the needy.
While the West and much of the Arab world has lined up to denounce Assad, Russia, China and Iran have defended him and warned against outside interference. Meanwhile, a group of New Zealand Syrians are calling for the international community to do more to end the bloodshed in their homeland. They gathered in Auckland to mark a year since the anti-government protests erupted in Syria, prompting a violent crackdown by President Bashar Assad. At that protest, and joining me now is Akil, the spokesperson for Syrian Solidarity New Zealand. Thanks for coming in, Ali. If we just start, and I guess if you could tell me your own experiences with that regime and why your family came here to New Zealand.
My father and my uncle were arrested in the earlier revolution 30 years back. My uncle was executed by the Assad regime for nothing else but for peaceful protesting. My father was also supposed to be executed. He miraculously escaped. So that's my background. My father has been on the run from the regime since then. He fled to neighboring countries, from one to the other, and eventually we've arrived here in 2000. And so we know this regime, we know how it operates, we know the atrocities that it has committed in the past. They've come in power in 1964, in 1963, sorry. In 1964 was their first massacre. In 1982 was their biggest massacre in the city of Hama, where estimating between 25 to 80,000 people were killed within a week. So unfortunately, what's happening today is no surprise to us. However, it needs to stop.
So what was the protest about today?
The protest was, first of all, commemorating the anniversary of the Syrian revolution that started a year ago, and also delivering messages to various parties, starting with the Iranians and Hezbollah, saying, take your militia and go out of Syria. Secondly, to the Russians and the Chinese, saying, stop supporting the regime. The people will always be there. The regime will certainly go away. And therefore, it's in your interest to actually align yourself and side yourself with the people and not the fading regime. The third message is to the New Zealand government, saying thank you very much for the efforts that you have indeed exerted in lobbying and putting some pressure on the Russians to stop supporting the regime. Nonetheless, because we know that New Zealand is such a good country when it comes to human rights and democracy, we are asking for medical aid and humanitarian aid to the Syrian people in Syria.
You mentioned the international community. What would you like them to do? What are you asking for? Do you want military intervention in there?
The international community has to do what it has to do. They have to, I mean, a buffer zone is a great idea. A no-fly zone is essential. And then arming the defectors, or what's now called the Free Syrian Army, is also very important. The defectors themselves can liberate Syria if they have enough power and enough arms and enough support.
You've also got the UN envoy to Syria, Kofi Annan, saying that he would like to put observers into Damascus. What do you think that would achieve?
I think that will be another failure, just like the Arab League failure. Observers, I mean, let's be frank. Today, you can observe using the satellites, and we know that there are already images coming from satellites showing the damage and showing the bombardment and the shelling that the Syrian regime has done on suburban areas, on civilian areas. And so, you know, what more does Kofi Annan want?
So you don't think it would open up things, you know, for reportage of civilians? You don't think we would then learn what really is happening there?
I think it's just giving the regime more time to kill more people.
So what is the resolution? What are the steps forward?
The steps are to arm the Free Syrian Army, provide them with enough support, technical support and otherwise. No-flight zone is essential for them to be able to operate without being overpowered, and a buffer area is very important for the civilians and the safety of the civilians.
Ali, what are you hearing about the numbers of people dead and things like that? I understand that you can paint quite a horrific picture of what is happening there.
Indeed. The Syrian National Council's numbers are more like 10,500 people killed already, more than 35,000 people missing. Most of them are probably killed. More than 65,000 people injured, and again, because of the lack of medical aid, they're probably going to die at the end. And then you have more than 212,000 people imprisoned. Most of them are under torture, and some of them, if not a big majority of them, will be killed under torture. And so it's a real horrific number. And these numbers, by the way, are very moderate because, you know, they're very deliberate. They really only record a dead body. When they have the body, they have the name, they know exactly where it is. The real picture, the missing people, the bodies that nobody knows about, the tortured and all of that, you know, it's a horrific picture. The numbers are in the tens of thousands.
How tough is it for you and your family to watch from afar?
It's devastating. Sometimes I feel useless, powerless, can't help my own people. But at the end, we can only do what we can do. And that's why I'm here today.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Ali. That's Ali Akil from Syrian Solidarity New Zealand.